Welcome to the 5-Minute Murder Podcast from 5minutemurder.com, where every week we take a look at a murder, a murderer, a serial killer, or an assassination in about 5 minutes. Episode 7. The Ratcliff Highway Murders. The Ratcliff Highway Murders, a series of brutal killings that shocked early 19th century London, remain one of the most infamous and unsettling cases in British criminal history. The savage nature of the crimes, combined with the ensuing public panic and the mysterious circumstances surrounding the apprehension of the suspect, have ensured that these murders are still remembered and debated today. In the winter of 1811, London's East End was a place of considerable poverty, squalor, and vice. The Ratcliff Highway, a bustling thoroughfare that ran through the district of Wapping, was notorious for its crime and disorder. It was home to sailors, dock workers, and immigrants, as well as the taverns, brothels, and lodging houses that catered to them. Against this backdrop of urban decay and desperation, the Ratcliff Highway Murders unfolded, casting a long shadow over the city and striking fear into the hearts of its inhabitants. The first of the murders occurred on the night of the 7th of December 1811 at a small shop on the Ratcliff Highway. The shop was run by Timothy Marr, a linen draper, who lived there with his wife Celia, their infant son, and an apprentice named James Gowan. That evening, the family and their apprentice were all brutally murdered in their home. Their bodies were discovered by a servant who had been sent on an errand, and what she found was a scene of unimaginable horror. Timothy Marr had been bludgeoned to death with a maul, a heavy carpenter's tool, his skull shattered and his face unrecognizable. Celia Marr had suffered a similar fate, as had James Gowan. Most disturbing of all was the fate of the Marr's baby, who had been violently struck and left dead in his crib. The ferocity of the attack was shocking, with blood splattered across the walls and floors, and the sheer savagery of the killings indicated that the murderer had struck with uncontrollable rage. Despite the thorough search of the premises, there was little evidence to suggest who the killer might be. The only clue was the maul itself, which was left at the scene, bloodied and abandoned. The murders sent a wave of fear through London. The press quickly picked up on the story, and the public, already wary of crime in the city's poorer districts, became gripped by a collective panic. People began to barricade their homes at night, and the sale of locks, bolts, and weapons surged. The authorities, under immense pressure to solve the case, launched an intensive investigation, but no suspects were immediately identified. The randomness of the attack, coupled with the apparent lack of motive, made the case particularly difficult to crack. Less than 2 weeks later, on the night of the 19th of December 1811, a second set of murders occurred, this time at the King's Arms, a public house on New Gravel Lane, just a short distance from the site of the first killings. The victims were John Williamson, the 56-year-old landlord of the tavern, his wife Elizabeth, and their servant, Bridget Harrington. As with the Marr family, the murders were carried out with extreme brutality. John Williamson was found with his throat slashed so deeply that he was nearly decapitated. Elizabeth Williamson and Bridget Harrington were both bludgeoned to death. The only survivor was a lodger named John Turner, who managed to escape by hiding in a cupboard, and who later described hearing the terrifying sounds of the attack from his hiding place. The second set of murders intensified the panic and horror that had already gripped the city. The similarities between the two cases, their proximity, the method of killing, and the apparent lack of robbery as a motive, convinced the authorities that the same individual or group was responsible. The public outcry for justice was immense, and a substantial reward was offered for information leading to the capture of the perpetrator. The breakthrough in the case came when a sailor named John Williams was arrested. Williams, who had been staying at the Pear Tree public house in nearby East Smithfield, was linked to the crimes by a series of circumstantial evidence, including witness statements and the discovery of a blood-stained shirt. However, Before Williams could stand trial, he was found dead in his cell at Coldbath Fields Prison on the 28th of December 1811, having apparently hanged himself with his own scarf. Williams's death, rather than bringing closure, only deepened the mystery surrounding the Ratcliff Highway murders. With no trial and no formal conviction, many questions were left unanswered. Was John Williams really the perpetrator of these horrific crimes, or was he an innocent man who had been hounded to his death by the weight of public and judicial pressure? The lack of direct evidence meant that his guilt was never conclusively proven, and doubts about his culpability have persisted ever since. In an unusual and macabre display of justice, Williams's body was paraded through the streets of Wapping before being buried at a crossroads with a stake driven through his heart, a traditional method used to prevent the restless spirits of suicides from returning to haunt the living. This spectacle was intended to reassure the terrified public that the monster responsible for the murders was dead, but it did little to alleviate the sense of unease that lingered in the wake of the killings. The Ratcliff Highway murders left a lasting impact on London, influencing both public attitudes towards crime and the development of law enforcement practices. The case highlighted the vulnerability of even those who sought safety behind locked doors, and it underscored the limitations of early 19th century policing. The Bow Street Runners, a precursor to the modern police force, were involved in the investigation, but their efforts were hampered by the lack of forensic science and the challenges of working in a city as large and unruly as London. In the years that followed, the Ratcliff Highway murders became the subject of numerous books, articles, and even ballads, each attempting to unravel the mystery or to exploit its dark allure. The murders also contributed to a growing awareness of the need for a more organized and professional police force, leading to the establishment of the Metropolitan Police Service in 1829. To this day, the true identity of the Ratcliff Highway murderer remains uncertain, and the case continues to fascinate historians and true crime enthusiasts alike. The brutal nature of the killings, combined with the uncertainty surrounding the guilt of John Williams, has ensured that the Ratcliff Highway murders remain one of the most enduring and enigmatic chapters in the annals of British crime. I hope you enjoyed that episode of the 5-Minute Murder podcast from 5minutemurder.com. If you get a chance, please leave a review wherever you get your podcasts, as it will help us to grow. Also, why not check out our other 5-minute podcasts, 5-Minute Biographies, 5-Minute History, and 5-Minute Mysteries. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.